of 2024.0. You then have a look at which sites you can include from your regional reference frame from your country. And as we said yesterday, even if the GNSS cores that you've got in your country aren't in the IGS, try and make sure they're linked with UREF, and they're being analysed by UREF, so you have those most up-to-date coordinates to constrain your national adjustment when you're doing it. So the positions from your GNSS cores in your country are then getting analysed with respect to the regional reference frame. And so let's have a look at an example here of where this has been done. Again, I've called on some of the information we've got from Australia. I'd actually like to have some other examples of how this has been done in other countries. So if you're looking at this and you have an example of how you've done it that you're happy to share with me, please do, because I'd like to add in some examples from outside of Australia. And if now that we're running this workshop, this might trigger some ideas from you to be able to share it with us in terms of how you've done it in your country. So in our case in Australia, what we did was we tied to the International Terrestrial Reference Frame. We used, this is actually 2014 because we did it a few years ago. And the ITRF sites we used in the adjustment were constrained with 3 millimetres, 3 millimetres and 6 millimetres in latitude, longitude and height. So that's the uncertainty that we had associated with those ITRF coordinates to constrain ourselves to ITRF. With respect to the regional reference frame sites that we included in the adjustment, we doubled those uncertainties. So there were 6, 6 and 12 in the latitude, longitude and height. And that was what we call an expanded type B uncertainty. And if those of you who aren't familiar with ISO terminology on uncertainty, type A uncertainties refer to the uncertainties associated with when the measurement is being captured and might have to do with the instrument and instrument uncertainty. Type B is more about your professional understanding of the situation. So what was the monument like? What was the building or the structure that you were working on like? What was the ground instability like? You can add some sort of professional judgment there around a type B uncertainty and add that in to enhance the uncertainty of those measurements. And then we included campaign data. And that was either high quality terrestrial observations or high quality GNSS campaign observations that weren't from cause sites. So here are the here's the first step. If you look at the top one, the ITRF 2020, for the national adjustment, we use the IGS 20 configuration, which is aligned with ITRF as the constraint for that national adjustment. So we brought in all of these sites into the national adjustment. And then we included all the regional reference frame information as well. So these are the ones that are continuously estimated from weekly solutions. It was aligned to IGB 14 at the time, and it was a cumulative solution, which was combining all of our different weekly solutions since 1994. And it included the full variance matrix, so we had full VCV, which went into the adjustment, and this, along with the ITRF or the IGS coordinates, were the constraint for the national adjustment. So we had 726 cores in total, and 488 of those were actually on the Australian plate. And just in bold there at the bottom, it's just that reminder of that critical element of having this regional frame, that if we didn't have the regional reference frame, we would only be constraining to 15 sites were actually included in ITRF 2014 at the time. So we get a much richer and denser data set by constraining ourselves to the regional reference frame as part of the national adjustment. And then this is the campaign archive that got added in as well. And you can see that it goes all the way out to places like Christmas and Cocos Island, which are Australian territories out to the northwest. And it includes 6-hour plus observations of GNSS from the campaign data. So in total, there were 6,092 stations with over 11,000 baselines, and they get broken up into clusters, which is more to do with how the software operates. So I won't go into detail into that just yet. So if you look at that in more detail here, what you're actually using for constraint then is this ITRF cumulative solution of all the weekly combined coordinates but since 1994. And those weekly solutions for all the ITRF stations went into a cumulative solution using CATREF. Thanks to Zahir for making that available as a minimally constrained solution that was aligned with that IGS frame, or the IGB, the second version of that, IGB 14. We then brought in the National Campaign Data Archive, which were all relative measurements. So as we were talking about before, I was trying to explain before, these are relative measurements. You're not actually bringing in any datum constraint here. These are all relative measurements between two different points with the datum element removed. So they're just coming in as GNSS baselines or terrestrial observations in the SINEX files. And the process that we went through, we use a program called Dynadjust, and this is a free, it's open source, it's in GitHub. It's been developed out of Melbourne University and a couple of the states and territories in Australia. And so Dynadjust, what it does, the process is similar. I'll just go through some of the details as it's described here. You import the data, so you're bringing in your SINEX file, your GNSS baselines and the terrestrial measurements. It then aligns all the stations and the measurements to the same epoch. So in our case, it was 2020 because the national datum was defined with that epoch of 2020.0. And so the datum and frame transformations then happen to bring all of the different data sets, whether it's from different versions of ITRF or historical datums from Australia, they all come into alignment at that same epoch at 2020. And if we use a plate motion model, if you're working within the same reference frame, or we applied the 7-parameter transformation if they needed to shift reference frames as well. So this is all done by a component called RefTran within the software. The next step is it needs to apply the corrections to the orthometric data, as I said. This is an ellipsoidal-based adjustment. So you need to get all of the data, including your orthometric data, which might be referenced to our levelling data in Australia is close to mean sea level. So you need to apply the geoid to ellipsoid separation to translate that orthometric height into an ellipsoidal height. And then that ellipsoidal height data is brought into the adjustment. It then does network segmentation. And the reason for this is because historically, and those of you who've done least squares adjustments know that inversion matrix gets massive. It becomes so big that you can't invert it any further, and computationally it's extremely demanding. So what Dynadjust does, it breaks up the network adjustment into a range of segments or phases, and it carries across some of the coordinates from one block into another block. So you can then maintain the variance and covariance across all the different components, but you're breaking down the mathematics into smaller and smaller blocks so that it can actually be done. And this can be done in a range of different ways. It can be done parallelized or sequentially phased. That really comes down to what computer or supercomputer that you choose to use. So here's an example of why you need to do it that way. We did an adjustment that had over 300,000 stations and over 2.4 million measurements that went into it from all different data types. Azimuth data, ellipsoidal data, slope distances, GNSS baselines, orthometric heights, leveled height differences. And the data that came in was actually selected by the states and the territories. They were the ones who decided, I want to be able to define the survey mark in our jurisdiction using this measurement or using that coordinate, and I want to leave that one out because I don't trust it. They were the ones who had to interrogate their own local data sets, and then they supply that information to us to run it through a full national adjustment. We then do the adjustment and provide the output coordinates and the uncertainties back to them to put into their databases. Because they are, in Australia, they're the ones who manage things like the cadastre and house boundaries and things like that. So we don't want to be the ones that are propagating that information back out to the user. We want to make sure that they're doing it in a way that they can explain it to their stakeholders. So we just sat in the background and handled the mathematical side, and they had the complicated stakeholder engagement side. So here's just a brief snapshot of what that software adjustment package looks like for those who are interested in trying to use it. It's called DynaJust. You can throw as many measurements and observations as you like. It has an excellent user guide to it with worked examples in there. The people behind it, Roger Fraser, Frank Lay and Phil Collier, I have the highest admiration for. They could have easily gone out and sold this software and probably made a lot of money, but they're all public servants. They've all got a heart of gold and they've made it available for free. And just to show you how valuable it is, they gave the license across to the Commonwealth Government, and we've made it available on GitHub, along with all the support tools that are in there. And then Esri, a little company called Esri, some of you have probably heard of, heard about this adjustment package, and they actually approached Roger and us at Geoscience Australia, and they asked to put it in the back end of their land management system, because their existing land management adjustment tool could only handle a certain inversion size. And then they heard about this that could handle any size, and they've built DynaJust now into the back end of Esri. So Esri uses this open source tool to manage all their land management systems in the back end. And they're, of course, very appreciative to people like Roger and Frank and Phil, as well they should be. But to us, that's a great example of how you can, of public good and making things available for a public good. So if you'd like to know more about that, I'm happy to fill you in later on. There's also some more nerdy information in here that I'll leave in the chart, but this just describes how it does sort of a forward pass, a backward pass, and a combination pass to, as I said, to maintain that variance, covariance, which is critical when you're breaking down a problem, to make sure that you've got enough information that's being shared across the different blocks so that it becomes a rigorous solution by the time you get to the end of it. And here's an example of how long it takes to run a national adjustment. When we went through the process of trying to do this for that 2.4 million measurements, the first time we set it off running on a supercomputer, we were told it was going to take 247 days to run the national adjustment. And so we had to work with people who understand inversion matrices and understand supercomputers to parallelize this code and get it down shorter and shorter and shorter. And I now think, what are we at? The estimated time back then, my colleague Craig Harrison was working on this, then got it down to 2 hours using new libraries, smarter ways of parallelizing the code, and different Intel compilers running in the back end. So we were talking before about building networks with people from different fields and different industries. This took us from being able to run this solution once a year to now being able to run it 5 times a day if we needed to. So we do that once a month, and we're actually constantly reproducing new coordinates for countries, for different states in Australia, and then they choose when they want to take that information, upload it into their database, and then make it available for their customers. So I'll stop there. I hope that's a description that helps you understand how these adjustments can be done on a continental scale, and gives you some advice and guidance on some of the software you could potentially use as well. And with that, I'd be really keen to hear from other people about the kind of techniques that they use to develop their national datum or monitor the quality of their national datum, because I know a number of countries in Europe have older datums. Is there anything you actually do to monitor the accuracy of the datum, or is there work that you're doing to update your datums? So I'll open the floor for comments. Thank you. So we've got 2 options here. I think the first thing we need to work out is how many different groups this could be relevant for. So the idea of this session is an activity that's meant to help those countries who may be thinking about development of a new national datum. If there's no one who is considering that within this group, there's not a lot of point in having this activity. So I need some people prepared to be brave if one of their intents of this workshop was to come here and learn how to develop a new datum for their country, aligned with ETRS or different version of ITRF or making some change, can I get you to please raise your hand now?